rustle of grass, the clatter of hoofs, the whistle of string, and the whiff of a steppe wind that fell into a hollow stem. All these sounds that surrounded our ancestors. Listening, people learned to play them, inventing a variety of musical instruments. Mobile, lightweight, and convenient for nomadic life. It's a project about musical instruments created by the great nomadic civilization. Gegun, the most ancient name of the Kyrgyz. This is how the Chinese chronicler Sima Qian, who lived in the first millennium BC, marks this mountainous people. Another Chinese source, dating back to the year 841, describes the Yenisei Kyrgyz as follows. Men wear white wool hats, women wear wool dresses or imported silk. They know the months, seasons, and 12-year cycle of years. They have a written language. They know instruments like flute, tambourine, shen, and drum. Musical instruments, they are among the most important cultural carriers of any nation. Their forms and materials of which they are made can tell about life, lifestyle, worldview of people. And their sounds seem to come from the depths of the centuries. And then the 1,000-year history of the Kyrgyz people comes to life.
Kyrgyz tarixi бұл тетіге алмұздақтан бері келе жатқан оқмыштай чоң.
The Kyrgyz people have a very ancient history. It originates from the prehistoric period. Our history is preserved above all in oral folklore and in musical culture. And it in turn was preserved thanks to ancient musical instruments, which were created by our ancestors. Since ancient times, music has accompanied the Kyrgyz everywhere. It is possible that initially these are primitive subjects that made sounds and were not musical instruments. Nomadic people used them in everyday life. Using the signal tools of the war, they gave signs of an approaching enemy. The hunters beat the drums and blew their horns to chase animals, and the ancient shamans beat the tambourines, calling on the spirits of the ancestors.
Shamanism байыркы фарс тилинен бар жокту билет, келечекти билет деген.
From Farsi, shamanism is translated as knowing the unknown, knowing the future. Shamans often use the musical instruments in their ritualistic rites. For example, the Siberian Altai used tambourines. With the help of them, the shaman went into a trance and could influence, for example, the weather, and he could foresee the future. With the help of tools, they invoked spirits. Kyrgyz shamans often used komuz and kylkiyak. Extracting the sounds, the shaman also entered into a trance, the world of spirits,
жана
Also, with the help of instruments, shamans treated people.
инструменттерди пайдаланышкан.
The noise of mountain rivers, the singing of birds, and the roar of the wind coming from the peaks of Alato is a world of sounds in which nomadic people lived from century to century and considered themselves an integral part of it. We are in captivity of sound. The sound is eternal. The sound is everywhere. And inside the water, too, has its own symphony. That is why these instruments consist water, air, fire, and earth. See what magical powers are. Sound, music, is the language of God. It is definitely the language of God. Why? Because we treat with sounds. Kyrgyz music is unique. In its sounds, it has preserved the archaism inherent in the instruments of Nomads. Temir komuz is the Kyrgyz type of vargan. This is a reed instrument, widespread among the Turkic people. Passed through the centuries, it has not changed. Temir komuz consists of a forged iron arc in the middle of which a reed is attached, with a hook at the end. It is small in size, only 5 to 7 centimeters. The simplicity and even primitiveness of this instrument, however, requires special skill from the performer. While playing, temir komuz is pressed to the teeth or lips. The oral cavity serves as a resonator. Changing the articulation of the mouth and breathing makes it possible to change the timbre of the instrument. In addition, the position of the diaphragm brings new shades to the sound. This is the language. The more they are, the lower they will be. Therefore, it is only for the orchestra. But when the vibration goes, here the sound goes. And I not only blow myself, I swallow air. Here is the system. Here the notes are here. So the human body is involved in the birth of sounds, fingers of the hands, organs of respiration, speech, and even abdominal pressure. In ancient times, it was believed that playing the harp clears the mind, strengthens the vital force of a person, harmonizes the functions of all organs. What we are blowing into these instruments is the yogic system. Therefore, it connects proper breathing, normal heartbeat, blood circulation. These instruments influence the cranial pressure. All is completely medicine. First, you need to create a plate, then cut a reed out of it. The famous Kyrgyz researcher, musician, who recreated a number of ancient instruments, Nurlanbek Nishanov, is working on making an instrument related to temir komuz. It is made of wood and is called a Jibek komuz. According to scientists, this Jibek komuz is much older than the metal vargan. I want to go back to the ancient instruments. Here's the Jibek komuz. So this instrument is very old according to scientists. It is 5,000 years old. At first, it was made from animal bones, and nowadays it is possible to make it. Now they're made from hard rocks of mountain bushes, such as barberry and so on.
Как, например, барбарис и так далее.
The Jibek komuz is a wooden plate with a tapered end between 13 and 18 centimeters in length. The reed is cut out of the plate to which the silk thread is attached. The rule of sound extraction is similar to Temir komuz, while the vibrations of the reed are achieved by tugging a thread. Each instrument has its own history, going back centuries, and no matter how much time passes, its sound will bring the person back to origins again. So the musical instrument is the keeper of the past. That is why a man honors it, assigns an important place in culture, gives it secrecy, telling legends about it. Such instruments have belonged to the Turkic Mongolian people since ancient times. We called it kylkiyak. You, the Kazakhs, call it komuz. The origin of them is the same, I think. And they are very ancient. Many Western musicologists came to the conclusion that the komuz and kylkiyak are the ancestors of modern stringed instruments of Europe, such as violin and cello.
Как скрипка, там виолончель.
Kylkiyak is a two-stringed musical instrument. According to legend, it was created by a warrior named Joly. He had a faithful horse, which together with his owner went through quite a few battles. But once the horse was killed in battle, saddened by the death of this comrade, the batir made an instrument from a piece of wood. He made strings from the hair of a dead horse, and instead of a deck, he pulled a piece of skin. Thus he made a kylkiyak. With it, the despairing batir produced the melody, a sad song in memory of his battle horse. Another musical instrument, without which perhaps not a single holiday takes place in Kyrgyz society, is a komuz. With the help of it, singers express their feelings, sing the love of their native land. Komuz consists of two main parts, the body and neck, along which three strings are stretched. The total length is a little less than 1 meter. All parts, body, head, neck, deck and pegs are made of wood. In past, komuz was much smaller and narrower than it is now. After all, our ancestors moved more often on horseback. Now we have created a concert version of komuz. To make the sound louder and the range is wider, we increased the size of the instrument, made the neck longer. And before the neck was shorter, one could easily hide a komuz under his armpit, sit on a horse, and walk the mountains. There are shepherds in pastures. The musician came to him, took out his komuz, and played on it. Unlike other similar instruments of the Turkic people, the komuz is necessarily made from a single piece of wood. A separate part is only the instrument deck. Most often masters prefer the hook for komuz. Komuz is the most common musical instrument, but playing it is not easy. The instrument has no frets, so it is necessary to have an ear for music in order to accurately hit the notes. Most of the works are rhythmic. At the same time, they play on the komuz not only with their fingers, and not only in the classical pose. Often komuzists arrange the whole show, delighting the viewer with his skill. According to musicologists, Kyrgyz today have over 20 types of musical instruments. Unlike komuz or kylkiyak, most of them were lost in the last century, but recreated in the last 30 years. Under the Soviet Union, only 3 instruments were officially considered Kyrgyz traditional instruments. These are komuz, kylkiyak, as well as timur komuz. That's all. All the rest were not considered traditional. Most of the signaling instruments were lost, disappeared in the late 19th century. Because their functions didn't matter anymore, because we were already under the Russian Empire. There were no large feudal lords, no khans, they have not been used anywhere. So we lost most of the instruments, primarily the signal ones.
Нигде не используется уже все. Поэтому мы потеряли большинство инструментов, в первую очередь сигнальных инструментов.
According to the researcher Nurlanbek Nashanov, the Kyrgyz, being a militant people, used various percussion and signal instruments during large Khan assemblies. Signal woodwind instruments are sernai, chinaron, and zeznai. They are small ones, there is a trumpet, and basically they're percussion instruments. For example, there is a dul, there is a dulpas, there is a bandula, like this, and jekesan. Scientists, musicians, and craftsmen restored instruments that were lost bit by bit. They collected the stories from Akuma'S, studied the archives, examined the records of travelers, turned to ethnographers, historians, and archaeologists. So in 2006, in the Narian region, during excavations of the ancient Koshoy-Korgon fortress, artifacts were discovered that archaeologists identified as prototypes of a wind musical instrument. As a result of my research, I found 2 unique instruments, musical instruments. I then assumed that it was sibizge or chor, made from the bone of a hoofed animal, a mountain goat or domestic goat. Approximately, in the tubular bones of the animal, there are holes in 3 places, very smooth. And it shows that this instrument has long been used. Archaeologists attribute the found artifact to the 10th, 12th centuries, to the period of the Kyrgyz dynasty. A year later, the scientists discovered in the same area a second similar artifact, a bone flute with a zigzag ornament. All these findings suggest that the musical culture of the Kyrgyz was developed 10 centuries ago. Surprisingly, the modern wind instrument, sibizge, differs little from its Kyrgyz prototype. There are also references to the ancient sibizge and chor in the epic Manas, a unique cultural heritage of the Kyrgyz people. In the epic Manas, sibizge, also a chor, are mentioned. 37 jigite sibizge menen chor bar. Sirtarın Manas barında Kyrgyz'ın kıra dor bar. There are mainly these 2 instruments. Sibizge and chor were instruments of cattle breeders. They, for example, grew their livestock with the help of these instruments, and people controlled them with sound. They could return animals to the house, and so on. Now I'll play an old melody called Koychunun Kyryu, a shepherd's melody.
Мелодия пастуха.
It is worth noting that it was the epic Manas that became the main source from which researchers scooped information about ancient musical instruments, a unique work consisting of these parts and numbering over 500,000 lines can be called a real national encyclopedia of the Kyrgyz. The epos includes all aspects of the life of the Kyrgyz people, their worldview, and ideas about the world around them. It contains accurate sketches of culture, customs, and life of the nomadic people. And the mention of musical instruments was no exception.
Айланайын сырғағым кечеген таласқа барғанда Үрманастың жанында мұны ошентіп қалғанда алтын оз кернейді арылдата тарттырып аземдеп жабу жаптырып мұны ошондо жанақы барабанын қақтырып чыңыр оны чыңырып мұны ошондо қарачы кыргыздың бары жиылып мұны ошентіп тұрғанда.
So musicians and masters, united with the Manas readers, began a detailed study of the epic lines. When I read the epic Manas as a child, I knew about the instrument chinuron there. I've never heard of the chinuron instrument before. It says it is a brass instrument. Chinuron tartib jaznaydan, chimchik ushpas ken saydan. Jeznay. Jez means copper. It could be a stringed instrument, either a brass instrument or a wind instrument. And how do we come to the conclusion that this is a wind instrument? One melody is preserved. Chinuran Kyryu is called for kylkiyak. In the 60s, when kylkiyak were recorded, one Aksakal who was about 90 years old said, Chinuran surnai ken. He said that the chinuron is a surnai, flute. Hear melody of chinuron, and he played kylkiyak. It turns out this is surnai, just surnai from copper, because its sound is very bright, screaming. That's why it is called chinuron. Chinurup, chirnu. This means screeching. The screeching sound and the functional feature of this instrument is the signaling instrument used in military campaigns. Researchers, one by one, restored many musical instruments. Most of them were signal and were used in military campaigns. Their primary goal was, of course, to raise morale and psychological intimidation of the enemy. Last year, when we presented traditional signaling instruments, we played an ensemble of signaling instruments. And then one guy said to me that his spirit is up, that he would not be afraid of absolutely anything. This music has such power. Kyrgyz music, whether it is warlike or lyrical, but only it can wake the most intimate, natural, and spirit of the nomadic people in a person. And while the Kyrgyz kuy sounds from century to century, the history will be alive. It is a history of a people who experienced a lot, experienced ups and downs, but were able to carry the original culture and epic history of their ancestors through many centuries.